for the establishment of the 6 parliaments, and obviously the onboarding of new members and for equipment for members, and for the rollout of the 2019 swearing in and inauguration of members, which will all see all of the new 400 members of parliament onboarded, trained, inducted and equipped. National Treasury, because of the financial constraints, refused Parliament's request for this money and left it with just the 8.4 million that was left in the budget. So to plug this hole and to make up for this, numerous austerity measures were agreed by the 6th Parliament Transition Committee, and this included a reduction in staff, the secondment of staff from provincial legislatures, as well as the reutilisation of existing members' ICT equipment. So members were required to hand those back so they could be refurbished, as well as a negotiation with other branches of government to help cover some of these costs. And yet, in spite of these slashes that have been made to the legislative arm of our state, and currently being navigated by the Parliamentary Administrative Services for the inauguration of incoming MPs, the public are now set to fork out over 120 million rand for the wasteful excesses of a presidential inauguration ceremony. By convention, the inauguration of the president, and it's been this way since 1994, have taken place at the Union Buildings with a selected invited audience, as well as some space for members of the public and obviously televised, wall-to-wall televised coverage. And while the South African public should be incorporated into the inauguration of the president, it is simply unconscionable that this year the presidency will spend hundreds of millions of rands to transport people in, taking precious financial resources from local municipalities to fund this jamboree, and moving the venue, of course, from the Union Buildings to Loftus Versfeld so that it can obviously pack in more people. This comes on the cost, we must remember, that we're now this year going to have 2 State of the Nation addresses. We've had one already. We're going to have an inauguration now. And almost immediately after that, we're going to have another State of the Nation address. 3 big jamborees paid for by the South African taxpayers who are already cash-strapped in this year. Kathy?
What is even more astounding is that the presidency has instructed the provinces to send 2,000 municipal delegates to fill the new larger state venue. The presidency has instructed that the cost of transporting these delegates to Tshwane be covered by cash-strapped local municipalities. This could amount to an additional 2 million rand alone. The dire financial state of our municipalities is not secret. Of the country's just under 300 municipalities, a total of 128 municipalities are in financial distress. Municipal debt exceeds the total amount allocated to local government from the national fiscus. More than half of the country's municipalities have serious liquidity challenges and are failing to deliver services, bill services and collect revenue. Governance, institutional and operational inefficiencies continue to plague these administrations, depriving millions of ordinary South Africans to access to even the most basic services such as running water, electricity or sanitation. Our municipalities should be providing basic services to South Africans, not busing delegates to political events. It is incredibly irresponsible for the presidency to redirect monies which could be used to fix potholes, provide water and sanitation to communities, to essentially rent a crowd for the inauguration.
In addition to all of this, and this excessive expenditure, it's also completely presumptuous. The ANC is functioning under the assumption that it will simply be re-elected come the 8th of May 2019, when this may well not be the case. South Africans are yet to head to the polls and cast their vote, and will be doing so in 12 days' time. Under a DA government, this type of excessive expenditure on jamborees like inaugurations and sonas would not be condoned. With a government debt burden of 54% of GDP, this is the type of expenditure where we should be cutting. These are the areas where we should be cutting the fat to make sure that every cent of public money is going towards service delivery and making a meaningful difference in the lives of individual South Africans, leaving a lasting legacy, not just one day of a grand party for the ANC. We also put our money where our mouth is, and those of you who are familiar will know that the State of the Province address of the Western Cape was dramatically slashed this year, a very low-key event. It came in at massively under the costs of any other of the states and the provinces. But what this also is the clearest sign yet that the tightening of the expenditure belt has only been lip service. Both the Minister of Finance and the President have constantly told South Africans we have to tighten our belts, we've got to do more with less, and exhorting government departments and key service delivery areas to tighten their belts. But it seems that the President, Mr. Ramaphosa, is himself not committed to ensuring that the people come first instead of flashy political events that the public must pay for and which last for a few hours. We must face up to the fact that the ANC, this time under President Ramaphosa, is the same old bus that genuinely doesn't care about implementing a financial turnaround strategy for this country after the 8th of May. On the 25th of May, South Africans need to know that it is money from their rates and taxes, which should be spent on delivering basic services, that will in a sense be used to fund Cyril's hoped-for fanfare. A DA-run presidency would immediately slash all ceremonial expenses to an absolute minimum. Our leaders will be focused on cutting corruption, delivering services, and protecting and building one South Africa for all. We're issuing a challenge today, a challenge to President Ramaphosa to put his money where his mouth is, to lead by example in the government that he intends to lead, and slash this wasteful expenditure, return the State of the Nation addresses to low-key events with limited expenditure, and to slash dramatically the costs of his planned inaugural jamboree. These are costs South Africans can't afford. They're expenditure we don't need to be spending. We can have a presidential inauguration, but we don't need to have it at the cost that's coming to the country and its fiscus. Thank you.
Thanks, John. I'll take questions, so you know the drill, guys, so that we can have this running smoothly. Babs, I see you have your hand already. Who else has questions? Cool. So I'll take the first three, and then if there are any, we'll go to the second one. Baba.
Hi, I'm Obalo from PWN. Do you have an idea of what the previous inaugurations cost, maybe a comparative study of how it cost at the union buildings? And on the topic, just to follow up on that, just on this topic of cutting excessive spending on ceremonies, there are 2 sonas this year. I know Parliament has been trying over the years to cut costs by millions. There's another sona in June. Should maybe that not be just a ordinary joint sitting with no fanfare and no red carpet and no dressing up? Would you suggest that as well to the President while we're on this topic?
If I can answer that, Babalo, it's very difficult to get comparative analyses because it's never included as a line item in the presidency. But I could say to you that filling a stadium at Loftus Versfeld and passing the expenditure on to cash-strapped municipalities is something new, and it's definitely going to come at a greater expense. It's always been a pretty tight affair at the union buildings, given the constraints of space, etc., which have kept the cost low. It also means that there's no venue hire costs because it's a government-owned building and government-owned facility. And so there's no doubt that this is going to be the largest presidential inauguration we've seen in post-democratic South Africa, without a doubt. In terms of the sonas, I think that given the financial situation of the country, given the fact that 10 million South Africans do not have a job, given the fact that our economy is growing at 0.8%, given the fact that we've got families that go to bed hungry every single night, given the fact that we've got so many people who still do not have access to water and electricity, the question we've got to be asking, is spending money on ourselves, is spending money on these types of events an effective use of public money? I would say no. And without a doubt, there's no reason for the SONA to be the fashion, artistic and political jamboree that it gets turned into every year. And I said this year is one of the years where we're going to have to pay for it twice. It's we're going to have 2 SONAs again. And yes, Parliament has made some efforts to cut costs, but these still are costs that are incurred on this event. There's no reason it can't be, as you say, a simple joint sitting with a little bit of an opening ceremony just before it, a trooping of colours or a taking of the salute, and the President coming into the chamber. And let's get down to the business. The business is we've got an economy to turn around, we've got to get the country working again, we've got to get people back to work again. These type of events don't assist 1 inch in resolving any of those crises or taking us any closer to a solution. So our view is to massively cut the expenditure on all these nice to have and the frills. And that's what the finance minister said. That's what the president has said. But when it comes to them, it appears that the belt tightening applies to everybody else, but not to the presidency and not to events like this.
Sure.
Hi, it's Abra of the SABC. I was going to ask you if you can give us some kind of proof or evidence of this request from the presidency, but I see you've... So is this what all the provinces got? And then secondly, I want to know what your thoughts are of the theme for the day. I know these things need to be planned and prepared in advance, but do you think that it's a bit presumptuous or preemptive on the part of government to have gone the route it did in terms of choosing the date and the theme is, what are your thoughts on all of that?
Well, look, I think that there's certainly got to be planning that's done. You know, these events are very difficult to put through at the last moment. But obviously, the smaller the event, the more nimble it is and the easier it is to do it at a later stage. I think it is presumptuous. I think it undermines the election. Who knows what's going to happen on the 8th of May? We could end up with the ANC falling below 50%. There could be a protracted coalition negotiations. There could be a longer period till the president is actually eventually selected. And so I think it is presumptuous. I think the ANC operate on the fact that they're simply going to romp and hoe. And I think that it makes an insult and mockery of the democratic process itself, because you're simply presuming that you're going to come out. And then choosing your own theme for it is also completely presumptuous. There could well be who knows, coalitions that are coming in that may not necessarily agree with that particular theme. So I think it's disrespectful of the electoral outcome to simply go ahead and plan as if you're coming back into office and you're going to romp home.
Cool. Lindsay, and then we'll come to you.
Lindsay Denking at ENCA. Just following up from Abra's question, she was asked about, I just want to get the context of when you were made aware of this cost. If you're saying previously it's never been indicated in a line item. I know this thing is dated November already, but I don't know. Could you just give us the context of how you've become aware that this is the cost? And in your view, what would be a more a better figure to spend, given that it is a bigger event than has been in the past?
Sure. Well, we became aware of it initially during the original planning meetings for the establishment of the 6th Parliament, where it became very clear that that was the budget, and Parliament was concerned because getting members of Parliament to the presidential inauguration and etc. hadn't been included in that budget. Parliament was going to have to fund it itself. So we took a decision then that, for instance, partners travel, accommodation, etc., for the inauguration would not be provided to people who are living within 100 kilometres of the union buildings, etc. And we'd worked out epicentres and outer rings, etc. And we were told that there were efforts to massively cut it. It's clear now, after receiving this letter in municipalities, that there actually has been no effort to cut the costs at all. And in fact, the costs, I believe, are going to be excessive. How much should we be spending? Well, I would like to see zero. I think that would be the best thing to do. Let the president get inaugurated, take the oath of office, and get on with it. But I think that 120 million is excessive. I think you could probably get away with something like this, 2 or 3 million rand, if you do it on a contingency basis and on a shoestring budget, which I believe our current fiscal situation demands. Every 1 cent that's spent on this inauguration comes at an opportunity cost. That's 1 rand that could have gone towards clinics, hospitals, services, improving grants, improving access to basic deliverable items. And so, we need to be very careful when we look at every rand that we spend now, given the tight fiscal space that we're in, given the huge debt servicing costs that we have, given the fact that the economy is not growing and not moving. And I think that it would have been a very good sign, particularly to ratings agencies, to international investors, to watchers of South Africa, a massively reduced and cut down inauguration. I think people watching this sort of profligate expense are going to really start to question government's real commitment to cutting costs and focusing on turning the dire economic situation we find ourselves in around.
Tom.
No, I'm covered. She represented me well.
Okay, cool.
Shop steward.
But I think, John, the other additional point to make is these costs are also now being trickled down to municipalities. You've got municipalities in Limpopo, for instance, who have battled to pay salaries, and now they must pay bus providers in order to bus in people. But also the other problem lies in what's the formula going to be used to identify these delegates? You'll end up not having community members, but ANC branch chairpersons and youth league people occupying these buses to come to this inauguration. But the other fundamental point is this is directly opposite the austerity measures that President Ramaphosa promised in unveiling his New Dawn vision. And also, as John has correctly lined out, the Minister of Finance insists that we need to cut costs as much as possible so that we can maintain proficiency of government resources. And I mean, ideally, you would want to incur any expenses to this, but this is more style than substance, and it goes against what this presidency promised, and we are holding it accountable for that.
Great. Cool. Any other questions?
I think we can close it up. Yeah.
Thank you for your time, and great to see you all again. We've missed you the last few weeks. Roll on the 8th.